Good day to everybody around the world at magandang araw po sa lahat na ating mga kapwa Pilipino dito sa bansa at sa labas ng bansa. Itong araw na to, today we will be discussing the 31st Asia-Pacific Economic Community Summit held in Peru. But before that, some clarifications. We are just over the signal number 1 in Metro Manila of Typhoon Pepito, Super Typhoon Pepito. In the north of the Philippines, it was signal number 3 last night. And due to this typhoon, several things have been adjusted in our program today. First of all, Mauro Samonte, who was trying to reschedule his dialysis session to join us today, this morning, due to the typhoon, had limited options on rescheduling and therefore could not move his dialysis from morning to the afternoon. So he is unable to join us today. Likewise, for various considerations due to the typhoon, our regular moderator, Daniel Long, is unable also to join us, but he is being substituted for today by our technical man, who's now our moderator, Engineer Joshua Passion. So Joshua.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hello, thank you for joining us today. This is APEC 2024, People-Centered Common Prosperity, and also we'll be discussing about the 3.5 billion Belt and Road initiative Chancay Port open. So very international topics that I hope you'll be with us to discuss. We have a paper from Mr. Kaado Paglinawan, who is now undergoing surgery today, but he wrote a very good paper about it, entitled "The Philippines Opportunity Loss Has Becomes Peru's Gain." Because, of course, if we see the geographical location of Chancay Port, of course, it's a logical conclusion that it will be one of the centers of trade in South America, being a part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So today we'll be discussing about a couple of topics on it, and then one of it, of course, will be the APEC 2024, which is an international gathering. So will I read the article of Adol, right?
I'll start with the basis ng discussion natin today, the APEC 2024.
All right. So Mr. Herman Laurel, President of Asian Sanctuary Philippines, will be starting the discussion about APEC 2024.
Okay, Joshua, thank you for mentioning the situation of Mr. Ado Paglinawan. He's having his left eye surgery, which will be followed later on by right eye surgery. So he is absent, unable to join us today, but he submitted his paper and asked us to read it for him, which Joshua will do later on. But this is the fundamental matter that brings us together today, the APEC 2024 31st Summit being held or was held in Peru. So our position paper in the Asian Century Pacific Philippines Strategic Studies Think Tank or Institute is entitled APEC 2024, People-Centered Common Prosperity and Belt and Road Initiative Vision. 21 member nations of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Community have just concluded its 31st summit in Peru under the theme, quote, "Empower, Include, Grow," unquote, with the aim of further integrating the economies of the countries in and around the Asia-Pacific area for greater common progress and prosperity. APEC started in 1989 in response to the growing interdependence of Asia-Pacific economies and mushrooming regional trade blocs and open new markets for the members. Let's show the first slide of the group picture of APEC Peru 2024. That's the arrangement of the leaders of various countries that attended are alphabetical, so there is nothing to read into the fact that President Xi Jinping is right beside the Peruvian president, because letter C comes before the United States of America. President Biden is far, far behind, far to the right, almost the last, just ahead of, I think, Uruguay. Anyway, it is important for Filipinos to be reminded that the trade and economic relations the country is involved with should be top priority for this nation. But sadly, this is being forgotten the past 2 years, in particular, with the intervention of the United States of America to disrupt Philippine national unity and divert national energies to internal conflict, as in the Quadcom inquisitions raging right now, and regional tensions in exacerbating the South China Sea dispute, with China using lawfare, warfare with law, such as the arbitration row and new maritime law. In APEC, Asia, Latin America, and ASEAN, except for the Philippines, are focused on advancing economic prosperity. The APEC 2024, if we can go to the next slide, in Peru highlights the, quote, new galleon trade route, unquote, once proudly based in the Philippines, but replaced by the Shanghai to Chancay port route. President Xi Jinping will inaugurate the $3.5 billion Chancay port during the APEC summit, cutting shipping lines from Asia to Latin America from 42 days, from 40 days to 23 days, opening the vast market of Latin America to Asia. The Chancay port project in Peru is a Belt and Road Initiative project of China with Peru, where the world can witness the unfolding of the global plan of infrastructure investments and development, transforming economies and nations stuck in centuries of snail's pace economic ascendance caused by oppressive oppression, and the parasitic exploitation by Western powers, and be liberated to pursue fast-paced agricultural and industrial development opened by market accessibility. Way back in 2014, in the 2014 APEC meeting, President Xi said, quote, we are duty-bound to create and fulfill an Asia-Pacific dream for our people. This dream is about acting in the spirit of the Asia-Pacific community and out of a sense of shared destiny, following the trend of our time, quote, peace, development, and mutually beneficial cooperation, and jointly working for the prosperity and progress of our region, unquote. This year, in the 31st APEC Summit, President Xi is cutting the ribbon for Latin America to realize this dream. This next graph shows the expected export goods from Latin America to China: cranberries, avocados, soybeans, iron ore, frozen meat, coffee, similar products that the Philippines should also be exporting to China, but we are stalled for the meantime. Aside from Peru, Chile, Brazil, Colombia, and Ecuador will be expanding trade by multiple fold. Their combined export of 135 billion to China, thanks to the Belt and Road Initiative port project. The Philippines opted out, or was forced to be outed by the US. out of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2023, after the staged South China Sea clashes, the Philippine Coast Guard initiated against the Chinese Coast Guard, which is a blow to Philippine economic development and progress, from which it is unable to recover from to this day. Bongbong Marcos Jr. and his US proxy minions are made to expect alternative economic development support from the United States, Japan, and at that time, India. Now, India is leaving the US-Japan alliance gradually to join the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership led by China, while the US has denied a free trade agreement with the Philippines and Japan, or rather, and Japan is teetering on the precipice of a recession. The Filipino-US proxies have doomed the Philippines and Filipinos by this. The Economic and Trade Plan of the United States of America is called the IPEF. We can show the next slide. The Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. However, it has been struggling, as this headline reports. Indo-Pacific Economic Framework struggles to deliver trade benefits as the US looks inward and further inward with the sweep of the US government by the Trump party in the last election. The significance of the Belt and Road Initiative, which we will take a look now, if we can look at the next slide. The Belt and Road Initiative is a combined activity of 5.1 billion people of the planet Earth. It has a combined GDP of all countries involved in the BRI, $41 trillion. Trade between China and the Belt and Road Initiative is 2.8 trillion. This is in 2021, which has expanded obviously the past years. And total value of investment and construction projects in the Belt and Road Initiative countries is over $1 trillion at this time. It shares the vision, a path to global well-being, a path to prosperity, a path to openness, a path to innovation, and a path to social progress. Here is one assessment of the impact of the Belt and Road Initiative on ASEAN. This is from the Carnegie Foundation, China. I describe it as this is only one of the many assessments. It is not the entire story of the Belt and Road Initiative impact on ASEAN, but this is the best graph I can find for your benefit. And this was an assessment made very recently, ranging from very negative, neutral, positive, and very positive. Let's look at the map. Scholars from 8 Southeast Asian countries provide their takes on the impact of China's Belt and Road Initiative in their countries for the past decade. Myanmar marks it as very positive. Cambodia, likewise, marks it as very positive. Laos, likewise, marks it as very positive. Malaysia marks it as positive. Vietnam, neutral. Thailand, positive. And Indonesia, positive. And the Philippines, negative. But of course, I know the scholar involved in the Philippine assessment, Alvin Camba. He is also engaged with the Center for International Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, an American institution. I have dealt with him, and I can understand the slant that he exhibits. But of course, the case of the Philippines is really not the fault of China or the Belt and Road Initiative. It is the case of the Philippines withdrawing from the Belt and Road Initiative and failing to tap the real potential of this massive infrastructure development program of China and the Belt and Road Initiative. Let us look at the impact of the Belt and Road Initiative in Asia. As you can see in the map, it is all over Asia that very significant major projects such as the China Central Asia West Asia Economic Corridor, China Pakistan Economic Corridor, Bangladesh China India Myanmar Economic Corridor, China Indo-China Peninsula Economic Corridor, China Mongolia Russia Economic Corridor, and the new Eurasian Land Bridge. Of course, we have no time to dwell on the individual projects in ASEAN, such as the Malaysian East Coast Linkage Railway, the Laos-China Fast Rail, the Indonesian Bandung, Jakarta to Bandung Fast Rail, and so many other projects. Now, I want to dwell a bit on the Philippines and the Belt and Road Initiative, a postscript on the Philippines and the Belt and Road Initiative. Philippines to exit from China's Belt and Road Initiative. The next slide shows, and I got it from the Times of India, so it's a neutral source. In November of 2023, it was announced and broadcasted all over the world that the Philippines was leaving the Belt and Road Initiative, the multi-decadal, multi-trillion global interconnectivity transport, trade, power, and telecoms infrastructure program of China, using its South China Sea dispute with China as an alibi, but actually due to the arbitrary act of President Bongbong Marcos, BBM, in betraying the country's independent foreign policy or what multitudes believe to be a quote-unquote secret deal with the United States over hidden wealth. So you can see the inset there. China's withdrawal puts the Philippines' $850 million freight railway project in limbo. And this is just one of the railway projects that has been foregone by the Philippines due to the pressure of the United States of America. In particular, 3 railway projects are the Mindanao Circumferential Railway, which is 1,100 kilometers in length, the Bicol Revival, Bicol Express Revival, and the North Rail transport system that have all been canceled. In retrospect, PBBM's deal with the Americans to withdraw from the China-funded Belt and Road Initiative projects with the Philippines at the very inception of his government in July of 2022, just a month after, let's look at the next slide. The inauguration of his government, just a month after the inauguration of his new government, PBBM's minions, Marcos's minions, were already emitting the signal. Department of Trade Undersecretary Cesar Chavez announced that the government, quote, may scrap its deal with China on the Laguna to Bicol Railway and tap private investors instead, unquote. Actually, this is a signal in the mode of development that the Philippines under PBBM was choosing, and that is privatization, more costly, more taxing for the consumers and commuters of the Philippines. So this is a direction set. And they cover their tracks in this approach by several means. For example, some of PBBM's minions' claims are, and rather, can we, yeah, let's. China's loans charge high interest rates, an allegation that American-inspired Filipino sources had kept claiming from the start of the Duterte administration, and which had repeatedly been debunked by finance officials of the Duterte administration, pointing to the 2% interest compared to even higher rates accepted by previous governments of 3%. We have our reference material published here. And this is a report from 2019, as far as 2019. Finance Secretary Carlos Dominguez at that time had already debunked the misleading claims on China loans. This is another quote or report from that time from the Department of Finance. The common critique against Chinese official development assistance loans is that they are seen as more expensive versus the Japanese ODA loan. This is an inaccurate assessment, as financing terms such as currencies and the maturities of each loan are different. Directly comparing nominal interest rates of Japanese yen-dominated loan versus US dollar denominated loan is like comparing apples to oranges. Deliberately deceptive propaganda by the US proxy media and politicians.
Yeah, for clarity, I've
Right.
also added
Go ahead.
to this chart interest rate and maturity reported by Pia Gutierrez. DOF points out that if converted to USD, the 2% interest on Chinese loans, Kaliwa and Chico dams, is lower compared to Japan's 2.7 north-south commuter rail. So as we can see in the chart, so we've reported this plenty of times. Interest rate and maturity. Let's compare. It must be converted to the equivalent fixed USD rate, because it'll be absurd if you would compare it to the other currencies. It's as if you're comparing kilograms and pounds. So you have to convert everything to kilograms in order to correctly compare everything, right? So we've seen here Japan is 2.7 and China is 2%. So this is a report by the media, Pia Gutierrez.
So these clarifications by the Department of Finance is not properly highlighted in mainstream media, and therefore misimpression is created about these Chinese loans. So let's move on to the next allegations against Chinese loans. Another tactic used by the obstructionists is to confuse the public by comparing apples to oranges, which we have explained, citing yen loans insufficient in the first place for the number of projects planned, with the 0.2, 0.3% interest rates that when converted to US dollars would be even higher or just equalize it. And then comparing Chinese dollar loans and thereby claiming the Chinese loans charge exorbitant fee. So here we can, and the Philippine government under PBBM and the Philippine mainstream media has perpetuated another deception, saying that China has withdrawn its funding commitments. This is debunked by Chinese Ambassador Huang Xilian's statement in July of 2022 that, quote, the embassy maintained that they are still negotiating with the Philippines over funding for infrastructure projects, as we can see from the Yahoo News report of that time. You can see that China reassures commitment to Philippines infra funding as projects remain unfunded. The Chinese embassy in Manila has assured the Philippines that they are ready to back the government infrastructure projects after a transport official said that several China-backed railways remain unfunded. In a statement Sunday then on July 17th, the embassy maintained they are still negotiating with the Philippines over funding for infrastructure projects. So there are many deceptions being perpetrated by the US proxies in the Philippine government. The next slide. The Philippine government under PBBM and the Philippine mainstream media perpetuates another deception that China has withdrawn its funding. Now, this is a commentary from Senator Amy Marcos, the elder sister of Bongbong Marcos. The date here, maybe we missed it, but it is very recent. It's just 2024. There it is. DPWH zero budgets at 2024 General Appropriations Act, according to Senator Amy Marcos. And the next slide, the final slide, will also show that this withdrawal from the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative projects and other financing from China has resulted in very serious and deleterious effects or impact on Philippine economic and infrastructure development. The last slide, is it there? You don't see any.
I didn't catch the last slide, but I can make it.
45 ODA backed projects problematic according to NEDA. It,
I'll try to work that in. I want to give my comments in the meantime.
Mm.
Yeah. First and foremost, we should consider this report from China Power, the Belt and Road Initiative, 151 partner countries that we're missing out on. 151. 151 out of how many countries do we have today? 200 plus. So basically, 3/4 of the whole world is in on this, with a combined population of 5.1 billion. So imagine the market on that. Combined GDP of $41 trillion, and also the trade between China and BRI countries in 2021, which is 2.8 trillion. So can you imagine the amount of money that we're missing out on, the trade that we're missing out on, because of our policies that are basically very damaging to the country. I think we can agree that us not being in the Belt and Road Initiative is actively killing our country, is actively degrading, making our country less than others, less GDP, less in trade, less in value, everything. So, and also this map on how has China's Belt and Road Initiative impacted Southeast Asian countries. It's very telling. Why is this map showing that, hey, only the Philippines is against the Belt and Road Initiative in the Southeast Asian countries? It must be telling on what kind of culture we're pursuing, what kind of trade we're seeing with our so-called allies. So again, we must stress that even now in our storm-wrecked Philippines, where is the promised aid by the EDCA sites that were plastered all over the media, or the justification of the EDCA sites themselves? They said that it's for humanitarian purposes. They said that it's for disaster relief. Where is it now? We must ask these questions. And also, how come that we're so near China? Basically, our neighboring country is China. Our number one trading partner is China. We must take that into account in how we must craft our foreign policy. And also, we'll show another slide on how Mr. Locsin himself said that the Philippines pulled out all the deals that we have made with China. So from himself, no, that's a quote from himself. So I think we're working that in right now.
well, how are you ready
Sir
to
Laurel.
Yeah, there it is. No. That's the last 45 ODA back projects problematic. Are you able to
Yeah, give me a second.
put it up?
Yep.
Well, anyway, while they're trying to put up on the screen the Business World Report, I'll just read the headline. 45 official development assistance backed projects problematic. The situation for these ODA funded projects was further complicated by the government's limited fiscal space as resources were reprioritized to address the pandemic and other matters. So there you see it now. It's a bit blurred. 45 ODA back projects problematic. Why back out of the Belt and Road Initiative projects when you are already short of funds for so many other projects that are so essential for the economic development of the country and for the economic upliftment of the population of the country. So that is the end of my presentation. But let us remember that the success of the APEC 2024 in Peru and the fantastic $3.5 billion project of China with the Peruvian government and Latin American countries is something that the Philippines is missing out with in the decisions of the PBBM administration since February of 2023. So we can proceed to reading of the paper of Ado Pagbinawan, which focuses on the Philippine aspects of this matter, of the subject matter. And before we go to Celso Cainglet's critique or reactions to what he has heard from our discussion.
Yeah. The article is entitled "The Philippines Opportunity Loss Has Become Peru's Gain" by Mr. Ado Pagbinawan. So I'll read this article. My first observation regarding the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in Peru is that Chinese President Xi Jinping got a red carpet treatment upon his arrival at the airport, while US President Joe Biden did not. This is, however, easy to appreciate because the focal point of Xi's visit is the inauguration of Peru's new 3.5 billion US dollar Chancay port, funded and operated by China. Beijing and Lima also plan to sign some 30 bilateral documents, including an updated free trade agreement. The Chinese delegation has some 400 businessmen and entrepreneurs attending the APEC event. President Xi quoted an ancient Chinese saying, "Bringing benefit to the people is the fundamental principle of governance. We will encourage Chinese companies to create more jobs and fulfill their social responsibilities in Peru, making our friendship more tangible and beneficial." The next interesting development is that Brett is already billing US President Biden as a lame duck. Victor Cha of the Washington based Center for Strategic and International Studies told media there's no real point for a US China bilateral meeting to advance any new agenda, other than to ensure some sort of stability in the interim before the transition to the next administration. Biden and Xi will, of course, meet again. The first known interaction since an April phone call and their first in person meeting on the sidelines of last year's APEC meeting in California. The paper is expected to discuss issues that have normally come up in Sino American talks in recent years: Taiwan, alleged human rights violations, and Beijing's support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, all as Biden prepares to leave office in 2 months. Quote, "It's ironic that Trump will be talking about tax across the board while at APEC. It is being announced that Xi Jinping is going to sign a new updated free trade agreement with the host country, Peru, added Cha. APEC and the various sideline meetings would be overshadowed by policy questions to the recent US election, which was won by Donald Trump, who has already named several China hardliners to top posts in his coming administration. Beijing will try over the course of this week and next to position itself as a quote responsible global citizen as the US turns increasingly inward. The US President-elect campaigned on America First agenda of anti-immigration and protectionist tariffs, including a threatened 60% tax on all Chinese imports. However, China is the second largest trading partner for South America after the US. It is also the largest trading partner for many countries in a bilateral basis and has free trade agreements with 5 countries. Beijing also has 22 projects underway in South America through its Belt and Road Initiative and mainland government scheme to improve trade and economic integration around the world. In an earlier statement, President Xi said that China was ready to work with Peru to practice, to quote, multilateralism, promoting an egalitarian and orderly multipolar world, and a universally beneficial and inclusive economic globalization. Great Inca Trail connection. Xi said that Chancay, a 15-berth deep water port, is the successful start of a 21st century maritime Silk Road and a part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. China is willing to work with the Peruvian side to take the Chancay project as a starting point to forge a new maritime land corridor with China and Latin America and connect the Great Inca Trail, he added, referring to a 15th century mountain network that joined the Inca Empire. The newspaper El Peruano quoted Xi saying that the Chancay project would generate 4.5 billion in annual revenue, create more than 8,000 direct jobs, and reduce the logistic costs of the Peru-China route by 20%. The China-controlled megaport was also built by Costco Shipping Ports and received $1.3 billion in Chinese investments for its first. China is expected to spend billions more as Beijing and Lima work to position it as a major shipping hub between Asia and South America. The first ship is due to set sail from Chancay next week, transporting Peruvian fruits to China, said Mario Ocharan, Peruvian director of the Chancay Chamber of Commerce. According to Ocharan, China's main motivation for developing the megaport is establishing access to neighboring Brazil, where a new railway line is planned to carry Brazilian exports such as soybeans and iron ore to the port. Building that link is, quote, crucial to improve transportation of soybeans, as Brazil is the top seller of agricultural commodity to China, he said. The inauguration of the port comes as Beijing is looking to further tap into resource-rich Latin America, amid trade tensions with Europe and concerns about Trump's announcement of future US tariffs on Chinese exports. So that's the part of the article, yes. And the next part is galleon trade. My initial discussions of the Chancay port within the Asian Century PH family is reminiscent of the Manila galleon. Spanish sailing vessel that made an annual round trip across the Pacific between Manila and Acapulco from 1565 to 1815. During the heyday of the galleon trade, Manila became one of the world's great ports, serving as a focus for trade between China and Europe, though Chinese silk was by far the most important cargo. Other exotic goods, such as perfumes, porcelain, cotton fabric from India, and stone, were also transshipped via galleon. After unloading at Acapulco, this cargo normally yielded a profit of 100 to 300%. While the trade did not substantially benefit the economic development in the Philippines, because most all Spanish capital were devoted to speculation in Chinese goods, the trade was the sole means of communication between Spain and its Philippine colony and served as an economic lifeline for the Spaniards in Manila. Suffice to say, the Spaniards in Manila came to depend on the annual vessel so much that when a shipwreck occurs or a ship was captured by English pirates, the colony was plunged into economic depression. I remember my discussions with the late General Victor Corpus, an 18th century PH author and subject matter expert, attempting to revive the galleon trade in as recent as 2017 with the Philippines through a new water port in Davao Oriental, serving as a transshipment base between the Belt and Road Initiative southwards to the uh, East Asian growth area, primarily Brunei, Indonesia, and Malaysia, southeast to Australia and New Zealand, and eastward to Latin America through countries in Oceania. The the Philippine government obviously was not prepared to engage intellectually with bold trade and economics, even during the term of President Duterte, and were mostly interested in lawyering for the Americans to render reputational costs against China. Our country is missing many opportunities again during the present dispensation as the world undergoes faster transformation unseen in a century as China embarks into a community of shared future with developing countries. That the Philippines would join the Belt and Road is still a pie in the sky as we speak. The APEC meeting this year is thematic of Empower, Include, Grow, created 1989 when Asian economies were booming. The intergovernmental organization aims to expand regional trade and reduce trade barriers. The group's 21 member economies combined represent about 60% of the global GDP and more than 40% of the global commerce. But APEC's own research suggests impediments are increasing in line with global trends, and that its economic growth is likely to lag the rest of the world. In case of the Philippines, its dalliance with the declining power of the United States and its counterproductive and destructive geopolitics, rather than engaging in the ascending economics now aligned with Brazil, Russia, China, India, China, and South America, have seriously thrown the country under the bus of robust regional development. Left behind in ASEAN, we now see China's infrastructural assistance going to Indonesia, China's investments going to Malaysia and Vietnam, and Chinese tourists going to Laos and Cambodia. With this APEC, what we now see is that the Philippines loss has become Peru's gain. So that was the article of Mr. Kaado Paglinawan. No? our Vice President in Internal Affairs in Asian Sanctuary Philippines. So it was apparent that he's speaking sense, that we have seen the improvements, the infrastructure, the plan, the grand plan that is being made right now with other countries, headed by BRICS, that is becoming a web of economies, a web of trade, the initiative to create the Belt and Road again for modern trade has been beneficial for those countries who did it. And then for the countries who aren't, we see and just envy those countries who are enjoying the benefits of development. And this just a start. Report has only opened now, but imagine its impact to the industry, impact to the economy, impact to the trade in the whole of South America, being the first link to the Belt and Road in South America. And so, interesting part of the article I'd like to highlight is China's plan and also Peru and Brazil's plan to connect to Brazil via a railway network. As we have known, a railway network is one of the most efficient ways to carry goods. It's a proponent of a good economy. It will inevitably give them better economies, better trade with China. So can we imagine how many people will help in Brazil selling to China and China selling to Brazil? That amount of trade, tremendous amount of trade, that will be through the Belt and Road Initiative, particularly the Chancay port. Can we imagine a Philippine port? Can we imagine a Philippine port? Can we imagine a railway network connecting Davao in Mindanao? Can we imagine region 1, 2, 3, 4 connecting to a port in Luzon, directly in trade with China? We must imagine these things as not so much as a dream, but as a goal, as we have seen with Peru's report. And we must see that we must compare it with the existence of the United States to get us a free trade agreement. Peru and China has a free trade, well, right now they're working it out. Will have a free trade agreement, and have for how many decades right now denied us a free trade agreement, even though they called our relationship as ironclad. That bothers me so much. Ironclad, ironclad, ironclad what? Ironclad selling, I guess. Ironclad, what about pre-positioning? What is the ironclad trade? What is the ironclad trade? The Philippines is being wrecked by Pepito. The Philippines is being the Philippines has a 160 people. But the news isn't really showing it. There's a news blackout. What is the headlines now? We're saying disaster relief. We're saying humanitarian aid. We can't even get on them. And they're coming up for using it. We're using the basis. We're using it. Are using it originally. It's used uh, for the Philippines. I think Mr. Laurel, I've highlighted a couple of points here.
Yeah. I think it's a very insightful commentary on Kaado's article. Maybe we can now go to Celso Cainglet as part of our reactors and listen to his analysis.
Yes, Mr. Celso, please.
Me, I can see my video. I don't know if I.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Good morning, Kamentong, Ka Joshua, and to all who are here. My focus today will mainly be on the Chancay port. But before going into that, just a commentary on
Kanyang email.
the presentation of Kamentong and Kaado. The port does not only reduce the sailing time, but they also reduce the shipping cost. Because, you know, in shipping, one day cabotage delay costs tens of thousands of dollars. If you notice in Singapore, in Hong Kong, and even in Manila Bay, there are many ships on the bay waiting to dock, to load or unload their cargoes. And putting this mega port hasten the loading and unloading of cargo, hence cutting the cabotage delay by days. You know. Now, okay, when it comes to the Chancay port, as fast as the jubilation on the APEC and the establishment of the port, the propaganda against the port was also very, very fast. There are many, it was mentioned already by Kamentong before, there were many issues that are anti-port, like for example, it's another debt trap. No? Washington would even invoke the Monroe Doctrine that the port would be used for the Chinese Navy as the other ports in Latin America financed by China, like in Mexico and Port-au-Prince, is used by the US Navy. By the Chinese Navy. But Monroe Doctrine is only for arms buildup around the United States of America. So why are they invoking this Monroe Doctrine against this Chancay port? But the significance of this is that the Chancay port becomes a military target. No? The Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA of the US, also issued their concern that the port may be used for drug trafficking, as Peru is a neighbor of Colombia. But the most interesting anti-propaganda I've seen is the one published by the Associated Press last November 15, written by Isabel Debris, who called the Chancay port as the monster port. And in this article of Isabel Debris, he said that the monster port is a concern, will have a devastating impact on environment as Chinese ships will dump oil, the possibility of oil spill, etc. But the most remarkable story in this article by Debris is that the local fishermen in Chancay, Peru, were robbed of their livelihood. There are images, but my laptop does not have enough memory to flash it here. Of interviews of fishermen crying that their catch has dwindled, they have to go farther, and images of empty seafood houses because the port has destroyed their fishing ground. But what is remarkable about this propaganda of crying fishermen, of oil spill, of empty restaurant is that it works. This kind of propaganda is reminiscent of propaganda similar to the propaganda against Kaliwa Dam and Halaor Dam in Iloilo. The displaced indigenous people, the environmental impact. But the thing is, it works. Peru, like the Philippines, has more than 80% Catholics for its population. And there's a close relationship between this emotionalism or this ad misericordiam propaganda, ad misericordiam appeal to pity, and Catholic emotionalism. The late Jesuit moral theologian Vitaliano Gorospe said, if you look at Filipino popular devotion, the Nazareno and the Santo Niño, Nazareno, a Jesus that is always suffering, Nazareno, a Jesus that never grows up. This fuels the emotionalism of the Filipinos. And this ad misericordiam propaganda works. And the question is, why is China not countering this? Either they're naive, they're ignorant, or they just don't want to do it. But it's very, very important to soften the ground if they want their programs to progress. Like, how come all we see are crying fishermen, but we don't see a fisherman in Chancay whose lives has improved because of this sport? I remember way back in the 90s when the wave of Filipinas went to Japan to become cultural entertainers, or what is commonly called Japayukis. I saw a movie where a mother and a daughter were washing clothes in the river. And the mother said, why don't you go to Japan and become a dancer just like our neighbor? Look at our neighbor. They were able to buy television. They were able to buy tricycle. They were able to buy refrigerator. Very simple as that. But it connects to the psyche of the people. China has to learn from Chairman Mao Zedong that an army marches on its stomach. And this soft power propaganda also costs money. But many local Chinese here wants to do this through guerrilla tactics where they said it will not be expensive. But take note, even the Philippine guerrillas before have been receiving substantial amount of logistics from the Americans delivered by submarines from Australia. The Viet Cong guerrilla, they received substantial logistic from Russia at the time. So guerrilla tactics that is cheap will not simply work. So simple things as that. Because this talks of billions, this talk of infrastructure are nothing. Common people cannot understand them. Why are common people important? Maybe in 2 years' time, the West will launch a war, and the reception of the local community is very, very important. That's one of the reasons of the success of the Americans in Europe, because of the local resistance, like the French resistance, who welcomed them, who supported them, because they believe in their causes. If the local inhabitants of Peru, of the Philippines, the common people do not agree with the causes of China amidst the talks of billions, because China failed to soften the grounds, it will be futile. Thank you very much.
Hello. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Celso Cainglet, Professor, for your thoughts. I think one of the highlights would be in the talk would be the Philippines really missing out. I think that's what we should be focusing on.
Well, the Philippines is missing out
really
because BBM program has the support of the common people, because the common people are anti-China. And we're doing a very, very lousy job in communicating with the common people. Do you understand me?
Yeah, I think the main problem with communicating with the massa is the control of the oligarchy linked within the United States of American finance capital.
Well,
Their control of the mainstream media, the Inquirer, Philippine Star, ABS-CBN, and so on, it is simply overwhelming. But Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute has plans to compete on the level of the USAID projects, Canadian aid projects, and so on, with projects that directly contribute to the well-being of our poor communities. So these are things on the pipeline. Indeed, there is still a great need, but also it should be recognized that the Philippines has been a traditional colonial possession, so to speak, of the United States of America. And they have been trying to mobilize the Philippines against China since 2012, when the US pivot to Asia was decided on. And they've been trying to do this for the past 10 years now. It's going on 12 years. And they accelerated again their anti-China propaganda in 2022, 2023. And we're seeing the peak of this anti-China campaign of the United States of America the past 2 years. But it is also declining because the United States of America itself is in major decline. Its national debt is now 36 trillion and growing by another trillion every so many months. So it goes with the historic times. But China continues to project a positive mode of keeps an open line and reconciliatory line with the United States of America, despite the declaration by the United States of China as a strategic competitor. China continues to extend its hand of friendship, its open arms to the United States of America, and keeps calling for the community of shared future for the whole world and the United States of America. So there are many interesting things that will still be developing in the months ahead, especially with the new Trump administration coming in. And on our part here, the Asian Century Philippines will continue to redouble its efforts to, as Professor Cainglet has suggested, redouble its efforts to increase the soft power with the help of China to create a realistic, honest, and correct perception of China with the Filipino masses.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the United States not really getting out of its wartime economy, wartime industry, and wartime tourism since the Second World War. So a brief preview, look back on the Second World War, wherein much of Europe was destroyed, and then the factories were on the United States, which weren't really invaded, weren't damaged, weren't destroyed, wasn't really touched by war. So it developed their economies heavily on armaments, on nuclear weapons, well, eventually nuclear weapons, and then of course the space race and the arms race. And then the United States never really got out of that, perpetuating wars here and there, juntas.
Yeah, but if I may intervene at this point, I think it's very important now to stress the vision that went into the creation of the Belt and Road Initiative to create, as if I may repeat, the goals and vision of the Belt and Road Initiative of China.
Growth,
The vision, a path to global well-being, a path to prosperity, a path to openness, a path to innovation, introducing new technologies to the developing world, a path to social progress. So how do we communicate this to the Filipino masses, which is the concern of Professor Celso Cainglet, which is correct and justified. But remember, the American colonial influence in the country, sustained by the traditional comprador class in the Philippine economy, is really clearly entrenched. And we're talking about 2 centuries or more. No, if we include the Spanish period, we have 5 centuries of Western control and influence in the Philippines, which we have to try to overturn. It is no surprise that it is only in the Philippines that this colonial mentality continues to persist, while even Malaysia, Indonesia, that were under the British and the Dutch, have clearly succeeded in liberating themselves from the colonial past. But I'll go back to Castle, so what he can add after our discussion on this matter. Castle, so.
Yes, thank you. If the US economy is declining, if they can give $4 million to their minion here to go to do takbo for the West Philippine Sea and finance the local news, the local media here, I know China will not help because they don't want to interfere in the internal affairs of nations, no? But there are ways to do it also. So I think it's really a challenge. I agree with Kamentong also that this colonial mentality is really very difficult to pierce. It's really difficult to disabuse the minds of Filipinos. But there are ways. There are ways. If Korea was very successful in dubbing their telenovela, which we have seen, and we saw the rise of Korean restaurant rising in the Philippines because of that Korean food they see every day, every night on TV. Why can we not do the same?
Let me just comment. The reason why it is more difficult for the Philippines to do so is that the Americans are actively, directly intervening in Philippine affairs, political, economic, and cultural affairs. So,
Yeah.
yes, Joshua.
Well, let's face it. The millions of dollars being poured by the Americans to the media through various sources, through various means, through various named entities isn't helping. Well, Omidyar donating billions, millions,
$5 million.
millions of dollars to
Rappler.
Rappler and Resa, and right now, the legal defense of Resa is being funded by international entities, foreign entities, isn't helping. That isn't helping.
I disagree.
Them being funded, yes.
You're not listening to local AM radio that every day harps on anti-China sentiments of the people. It's working, especially because
Yeah.
the is admissible
Well,
to
but
appeal to people.
my impression of the anti-China sentiment of the masses is really very superficial, because whenever I personally discuss with individuals, they would start with the anti-China rhetoric, but immediately able to change their tune when we just explain some things. No? So I go back to the control of mainstream media, because just to set up a newspaper like Inquirer would require billions. Maybe China would prefer to develop its defense industry in preparation for the partly inevitable war that the US wants to wage against China, rather than on propaganda. As we can see, the United States, Professor Cainglet is correct, is very effective in its propaganda, but it is failing in reality. It is losing in Ukraine, it is losing in Israel and Gaza Strip, it has lost in Afghanistan, it lost in Vietnam, and so on. So there is much to be said about the propaganda of the West and the Americans. It's good to remind the audience and everybody that the Americans have just passed in 2022 the America Competes Act, which allocated special funds of $500 million for anti-China information campaign. And under Biden last year, if I'm not mistaken, or just this year, they approved another $1.6 billion for anti-China information campaign. We don't know the wisdom of that for the American Congress to allocate so much when the United States already in economic and financial crisis. But that's what they're doing, hoping that propaganda alone would win the war. But it doesn't turn out that way, as we can see in Ukraine now. Of course, for the Philippines, what is important is we avoid any war that the Americans are trying to push us into. At the same time, debunk the militarization of the Philippine economy while the Philippines is bloating in its debt, while the Philippines is suffering increased poverty and misery because Gibo Chidoro, the Defense Secretary, wants to buy more on installment or in cash, which is based again on debt, more American Typhoon missiles. Well, anyway, going back to the point of Professor Cainglet, we need to do more media work, which we are doing with our limited resources and quite effectively because the other side is trying to suppress us with massive amounts of resources, which is not succeeding. And again, I would refer to the South China Sea strategy of the Americans using Tariela, Carpio, and company, assertive transparency, which has already failed again after around 18 months of provocations in the South China Sea. What has happened? The Teresa Magbanua was forced out of the Sabina Shoal. Now they're going into a second stage of lawfare or warfare with law, using the law, with these two maritime acts signed by Bongbong Marcos. But not only China reacted negatively to it, but Vietnam and Malaysia. So it's not going to go far. But maybe my final word at this point is that the 2 years of intense US propaganda against China may have its day, but it is in inevitable decline. Anyway, Ka Joshua, Ka Celso, what's the next thing that we can analyze?
Yeah, I'm flashing right now the report from Responsible Statecraft. House passes 1.6 billion to deliver anti-China propaganda overseas. So we've seen this in action. We've actually seen this in action, and we've seen this in action, and then it was denied by the Philippine government, well, unofficial. We've seen this in action during the COVID crisis. So let's have a flashback of that. No, the Philippines being locked down with no vaccines in sight, with the Americans hoarding their vaccines. America First policy with their American First policy, you know. They are choking the Philippines on their vaccines. They're withholding the Philippines from their vaccines, and they said that, oh, somebody dropped the ball, somebody, etc., etc. The main line is the third world wasn't given vaccines by the United States, even though it was available. Here comes China donating, letting us buy from them. But in the United States, in retaliation of what we do not know. I guess in retaliation of the goodwill that China garnered because of their vaccines, propagated fake news that was sanctioned by the United States military.
Can you produce that news item that Reuters reported?
Yeah,
the Pentagon admitting that they used anti-China vaccine false information, and it was carried by the Philippine media.
Carried by the Philippine media and also supported by the Philippine official. Sabi niya, a Philippine official said that, it's fake news. The United States wouldn't do that. But the United States didn't deny it. The Pentagon didn't deny it.
Okay,
We'll try to, yes.
if the US can release 1.6
Let's go back to
billion,
Celso. So yes, please.
can China not do the same? I have the impression that China is still, the government of China is still having this dynastic mentality that the government is very powerful, that whatever they do, the people will just follow, the people will just believe. The world does not work that way. Number two,
Well, as
whatever, whatever this vaccine thing, Filipinos still believe that COVID came from China. Of course, for us, we know that's not true. COVID was fabricated in Fort Detrick, Virginia, USA. But the majority of the Filipino people still believe it was China who infected the world, with Trump calling COVID as the China virus. How
yeah,
many?
but I go back to the problem of the control of mainstream media. What are you saying, that China must set up a dozen major newspapers, 5 TV networks, and so on? No, China will not do that, di ba?
That's
But
why.
what is more important is to note now that China is succeeding with 3/4 of the world's population, the global majority. The US is getting isolated with the global majority. The BRICS summit shows it. The G20 summit shows it now. The growing membership of BRICS Plus, which now has, I think, 23 partner countries, shows it. So I think the Philippine mentality is something, of course, a problem to us Filipinos, but the rest of the world doesn't really care anymore if the Philippines destroys itself with the American option that it has taken under President Bongbong Marcos. So we can only do what we can and increase our efforts, and then take into consideration the critique of Professor Cainglet and work harder.
Well, two things. Number one, people don't care about these BRICS or whatever. Just tell them that China is the cause of poverty in the Philippines, and they will believe it, which will what Trump will do. That's why Trump needs China to be blamed for the American economic woes. Number two, people are stupid, and America is doing stupid propaganda, and people are buying stupid propaganda.
Okay. Well,
So,
anyway, I'm not convinced that we are failing
if you
in persuading the Filipino people. I also suspect that many of the surveys are also paid by the proxies, so it's understandable that they will not ask the right survey questions. But the fact is, their efforts have been failing. Their assertive transparency has failed. Ariela is discredited to a great extent. The truth tellers are succeeding in many ways. So that's really an encouraging situation, actually, from my point of view. Anyway, Joshua?
Yeah, just like to add a couple of tangents to this, no? Right now, the United States is not a signatory to the UNCLOS. Right now, the United States is not a signatory of ICC. And yet, they're pressuring other countries to comply, to bow down. They're pressuring other countries to follow rules that they themselves do not follow. They themselves are not under. They themselves are, well, they even sanctioned an ICC judge, an ICC official, if I remember correctly, for going against the Israeli genocide. Well, I think it is clear now that the United States isn't really for the interest of their allies. The United States' main and number one policy has always been and will ever be America first. I think we should always remember that. We should champion what is good for the Philippines and not what is good for the United States. We have seen the effect, the yung kwenta ng EDCA sites. Ano mang kwenta niyan? Ano namang naibugan niyan? Sasabihin nila ginamit. Samantalang Philippine bases po yun. Ginamit, malamang gagamitin ng Philippine bases.
Okay.
If they're saying that we're actively using the EDCA sites for those are Philippine bases that is being given out free, rented out free. Every Filipino in this country is paying taxes on property or renting, except the United States, except the United States military. For what? For their promised disaster relief,
Okay.
humanitarian aid.
Anyway, Joshua, let's get back on track and back to the APEC summit and the Belt and Road Initiative. And Celso, what are your final observations? Is
Well-
Celso still there?
Yes, is there?
Yes, yes.
Yes, Celso. So we'll wrap up very soon. It's now almost an hour and a half since we started. So let's start wrapping up.
Well, yes, of course, I'm heartbroken that we like during the Aquino administration, we missed the boat again, and the Philippines will suffer to perdition because of its pro-America stance. But the challenge for us is to continue racking our brain how to really bring down to the masses how to communicate in a language that can be easily understood. But because I find the masses important because although in revolution you don't need to convert the entire masses, all you need are a few intellectuals to enlighten them. As Chairman Mao has said, nothing can stop an idea whose time has come. Thank you, Kamento.
Joshua, any final wrap up?
Yeah, we've seen the other countries enjoying, other countries improving, other countries having infrastructure being developed, and then it'll be the first step. And then the second step will be just following through, another railway line here, another port there, and then that will be their development. That will be for the economy of their people. Eventually, they'll have to lower taxes because of the trade they're bringing in. Well, that's the ideal situation. But eventually, their countries will be better. Their countries will improve so much more. Their improvements will be so much more accelerated because of this help, because of the aid of teaching them how to fish. No, the countries are being taught how to fish, while with our allies, we are taught, we are just being given fish. So we must look towards development, look towards infrastructure, so that we can help ourselves. Help us, let other countries help us help ourselves. That's my main point.
Okay, I have 4 minutes before 10:30, closing at 1.5 hours. But in response, of course, to the very valid observations of Professor Celso Cainglet, let me say that the political struggle is now the main subject matter within the Philippine political milieu. That is why we have seen in the past several months the struggle between the Bongbong Marcos and PROXY, American PROXY political faction, trying to destroy the politically mature faction of the Dutertes through the inquisition that the Senate and the Congress are waging against the Dutertes. And the last appearance of President Duterte, which elicited up to 4 million live audience of the hearing, President Duterte, I think, performed very well and demonstrated to the public the charade that the Americans are making the Senate and the Congress dramatize in this inquisition against President Duterte, who represents the independent foreign policy. So maybe one can say that the efforts of the Americans and their proxies are themselves the ones that will destroy their control of the public mind. But on the Belt and Road Initiative again and the Asia Pacific Economic Community Summit, I think we are being directed by this common or consensus all over the world that the world and the Filipinos really want development, economic progress, and economic upliftment. And we appreciate the efforts of the global majority working together to bring this vision into reality. Of course, with the major contribution of China, with its over $1 trillion investment already in the Belt and Road Initiative and more trillions to come, our effort here in the Philippines should be not to be left behind. And I think we thank Professor Celso Cainglet and everybody who is working together to liberate the mind and the politics of this country from the 500 years of Western colonialism and finally into an era of forever peace and forever prosperity. Let's close, Joshua.
Yeah, thank you very much for watching us discuss APEC 2024, people-centered common prosperity, and also we discussed the $3.5 billion Belt and Road Initiative, Chancay port opening. Thank you to our audience, Mr. Herman Laurel and Professor Celso Cainglet, and Sir Ado Paglinawan. So thank you for watching, and also please sign up in our sign up form so to receive our newsletter of the articles. Our articles will be published on asiancenturyph.com, so you'll be able to see it there. So thank you and good day.